Hi, it's Romilly with Golden Circle Designs, and we're going to work on the Fern Stitch today. We're kind of taking a step backwards from the coral stitch of the last video, which was actually 2 weeks ago because life intervened and I didn't get one out. But what we're going to work on is Fern Stitch, which is a compilation of straight stitches. That's all it is. It's just up out of the back of the fabric and down into the front in a design that kind of looks like ferns. I like it for seaweed because to me it looks like the seaweed that you see in aquariums in the when you've got a tank full of tetras or some such. It's not what I consider ferns, but then again, I'm from the Pacific Northwest, where ferns are lady ferns and sword ferns and very detailed. But I do like this stitch. It's really fun to use, and it makes a great border, and it makes a great, as I said, seaweed. But then again, a lot of stitches make good seaweed. So let's see what we're going to do. We're going to start, it's usually worked vertically. I'm going to work it with this line of fabric, and we're going to bring with the right hand. You will always work it top to bottom. With the right hand we'll work it left to right. With the left hand we'll work it right to left. It's a lot easier top to bottom, so I suggest that. I'm going to come up in the middle of the stitch, and we're going to create a diagonal stitch going up. If you're working vertically, it's up and to the right. If you're working horizontally, in this case with the right hand, it's up and to the left. This is a combination of 3 stitches. So there's your first stitch. Your second one, you're going to come straight across from that where you just went down. And it comes up, and it goes down in the middle into that same stitch that you first started. And then the second one comes back up here, and down in that same hole. This is a stitch that might be better made bigger with this thread. So then there you've got your first stitch. Your second stitch, you're going to start that center line straight down the middle. And in the same way as you did the last time, you're going to go horizontally. You're going to bring that into that same hole that you started with. So now you've got your start of your second motif. I need to pull this a little. So your second stitch is that diagonal stitch back into the hole you came up, you started with. And again, up and down. As I said, this is generally worked vertically from top to bottom. So this would be the top of your fabric, and this would be going vertically. But because it's straight stitches, you can work it any direction you want. It's always easier when you're doing stitches like this that are combined stitches to make sure that your needle goes down in holes that get full, which is why we've gone that way. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because with this thread it does seem to want to be. And you're going to go down in that hole, that last hole. And then we're going to make it a little bit bigger, so we're going to come up into this blue area. And it comes down that first hole. And into the blue area over here, again, because we're making this big, and down. And then your next stitch will be down further. That's probably easier to see. Then down. We'll come up basically horizontally from that line. You can make it smaller, you can make it taller, taller. Basically this kind of looks like, this stitch looks like a variation on the feather stitch that's just been worked straight, but it's a lot easier because it doesn't have that looped stitch. And it's not as versatile though, because you can't go side to side or up and down. It's just a straight, basically making little hedges. And that's the Fern Stitch with the right hand. And we'll come back with the left hand. Okay, we're back with the left hand on the Fern Stitch. A little bit more light in there. We're starting this working from right to left. I just do that out of habit because truthfully the stitch is usually worked vertically from top to bottom. So it doesn't really matter which side you start on. It's all straight stitches. If you're using the stabbing method, it won't change it at all, no matter what hand you're using. So, a little bit more light on the subject. There we go. So we're going to bring it up in the middle of where you want your stitch. This is the bottom of the first stitch, and you're going to go backwards. And in this case, I'm going to just start making it large because I discovered on the right hand that small stitches do not work well with this fabric and this thread. So there's your stitch. Your second one's going to be up here. You're going to go from the outside in so that your stitch is always going down in the same hole. Because as the holes get filled, it's a lot easier to go down in them than up. So there's one. Actually, that's two. And then the third part of this stitch comes up here so that you make a little W, sort of. A little V with a line in it. And that's your first set of fern leaves. Your second set goes directly below it or to the left of it. We're going to make, that first stitch is again that vertical line. This is your main stem. And I just realized this looks a lot like the horsetail ferns that we had when I was growing up. Not this what I think of as ferns with the lady ferns and the swordtail, but the horsetail ferns that came in segments that you could pull apart. So there's your second stitch, and up, and your third stitch goes down in that same hole. You might wonder why your middle stitch doesn't go the same direction. Well, you'd have to come up in that hole again. And that doesn't work. And it's always better to go down when there's lots of thread in a hole. So down, and then over to the left if you're working vertically, because you work from top to bottom, and down, and then the right side. I like this stitch for borders. I like the stitch for seaweed. The sewing method on this one works a lot better if you're working vertically top to bottom. And I don't actually really like to sew it at all, for the simple reason that there's a lot of going down in that one hole. And it starts mixing up the threads. But if you wanted to make it smaller, you can see how the threads work differently with this thick thread. It changes the look of it to make smaller stitches. but it's still the same stitch. And up. There's your bottom side. And a middle stitch. So while we call this one stitch, it's really three, and it's just that straight stitch, up and down. And up and down. And that's the Fern Stitch. So if you're enjoying these stitch instructions, you can subscribe to my channel or pop over to the blog where I give you actual photos of projects I've done using them, and a little more detail on interesting ways to use them. And that blog post comes up on Thursdays. So have a good day, and hopefully I will see you next week. Thanks.